I'm Stacey, and my husband is Maddie or Matthias, and my daughter is Madeline, and we call her Mads, and this one here is Peanut. When I found out I was pregnant with my daughter, I was so excited. I had been wanting to be a mum since I was a tiny little girl. And I've got a few younger siblings, so it was kind of a dream come true for me. And I'd already done a fair bit of research and started to look into best practice at what I thought was best practice at that time. So I started researching for a doula, and I'd been paying some private healthcare. So I thought, well, a private midwife in a hospital would be handy because then I get some rebate back from the financial perspective. And yeah, I felt really supported with my decisions. My husband was on board, and I guess I hadn't really even thought about a home birth because there was a lot of fear around it, and I wasn't sure. I mean, hindsight's wonderful. So now looking back, I think it was more my husband's fear than my fear. Because hospitals are where sick people go, and they do make me feel uncomfortable. I'm a dietitian, so I did prac and placement back in uni in hospitals, and I just felt so uncomfortable, and I realized it's not a place that I want to hang out. Like, it's got its place and it's fantastic. But in making that choice, I don't know if it ever felt truly right, but it was the safest decision for our family because I knew that my husband needed to be on board, and then from the financial perspective as well. So I did my hypnobirthing course. My doula was amazing. We had one midwife at our private midwife place to start with, and I didn't really click with her. So I asked for somebody else and got on really well with her and felt really supported. And I really, really felt, I guess, good at the time in that decision. I was going to spend as much time labouring at home as possible because I had my doula to be able to come to the house. The private midwife was happy to come and check me at the house. And then when it was time to go to hospital, we would all go together, and then, we would let everything unfold as, unpredictably as it needed to. When I realised that I was in labour was about 1:30 a.m. on Monday the 14th of October 2019, and I woke to surges that I couldn't ignore, contractions, hypnobirthing language, and I was too excited to sleep through it, so I hopped up and let my hubby keep sleeping, and I just had this feeling that everything was going to go quite quickly. I don't know why. I thought, everything was going to be super smooth, and I'd been resting for ages. I think I'd been on maternity leave because I was about 41-ish weeks pregnant by then, 41, give or take, I think +3, depending on which due date you go off. And I was very ready to meet her because I had thought she was coming at 38 weeks. At this point, I didn't know what gender she was, so I'll refer to her as she because we found that out afterwards. But at the time, so baby gave me some false alarms at 38 weeks, and I had that kind of on-off latent phase for a little bit leading in, and perhaps she wasn't quite in the right spot and she was adjusting or just preparing me mentally and letting me have rest in the lead up. But by the time she came, I was a little frustrated because I was just like ready to meet her, as I guess most first-time moms are, ready to meet their little ones. And everything kind of felt like it was just cruising along to start with. I messaged my doula, I messaged my midwife, I messaged my videographer, and that was fairly early on in the morning. My husband woke up around 7:30, and I said, this is happening today. But it was just surges at that stage, that kind of period pain feeling, and no water's released or anything like that. I'd lost my mucus plug earlier that morning. So I kind of knew, things are happening. And then around lunchtime, so I guess 12 hours, just things are starting to build, and everyone had kind of arrived at the house except my midwife. So doula had arrived, videographer had arrived, surges were getting closer together. And then the afternoon into the evening was a bit of a blur, but it still didn't feel like we were at the pointy end yet. And so I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be a longer haul than I thought it was going to be. So the midwife came once it got dark. I think that was around 5:30ish in the evening. because I had that continuity of care and that private midwife booked in, even though we were planning the hospital birth, she said she was happy to come and check me at the house. And originally I thought I didn't really want any vaginal exams. But I guess by that stage I'd already been in labour for over, not active labour, but like, you know, fairly consistent labour for over 12 hours. And so I had an internal just to see what was happening. And she seemed, I don't even remember what the number was or if I wanted to know, but she seemed fairly happy that things were progressing. And yeah, I guess it starts to get a bit blurry around that time. But from memory and what I've been told by husband and doula, that, you know, we did a lot of spinning baby stuff because it didn't feel like things were progressing. And then everyone was encouraging me to lay down and rest, but I was getting a lot of back labour. I was in pain. So it wasn't just the surges. I was dealing with whatever position baby had moved herself into that wasn't really working for me or allowing her to move down. And so I tried to lay down and I couldn't. And as I got up, I started vomiting, and I thought things, you know, were getting a bit more intense again. And then my doula came in to tell me that the midwife had left without telling me that. So she didn't come and have a conversation with me. And at that point, I just remember feeling like I'd been abandoned. And yeah, it felt quite distressing. And I definitely remember, like, even now I'm getting emotional about it, felt like I went into almost like a fear response of like, well, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I've never done this before. And now, you know, the doula is great for emotional support, but she's not a medical practitioner. And the message that the midwife had left with my doula was, when your waters release, come to hospital. And I was like, okay, it's information, but then my waters didn't release. And so it was 12:30 the next night. So I've been in labour for almost 24 hours and my support person is gone and we've got no comms with her. And I'm realizing as I'm telling the story, you know, I gave a lot of my power away, but I feel like that's what the system, the current medical system, it's great when you need it, but I went into that process giving away my power, the way I was spoken to, not by anyone's fault, just the bigger system, patriarchy or whatever you want to call it. You know, the way I was spoken to in my consults at the time, the continuity of care was fantastic. But when I look back on it, she was the expert and I wasn't in charge of my own birth and what my body needed to do. So I wasn't thinking, what can I feel? Where's baby? What do I need to do? I was waiting for somebody to tell me that information. And that's not how our bodies birth babies. So, yeah, by that point with, you know, hours of vomiting, starting to get a bit dehydrated, maybe I was starting to get a bit feeling like I was a bit pushy and things were starting to move down, or maybe I was just so lost and frustrated. I don't even know. I was like, we need to get to the hospital because maybe once I'm where I'm birthing my baby, I'll relax. And if the midwife is there, at least I'll feel like my, you know, power person is there to look after me again. So we made the decision to drive to the hospital. And yeah, we got there about 1:30, and I remember going straight to a birth stool I was in the birth centre, so it was like, you know, we had the birth pool there, we had the double bed, so it was a bit more homely. And, you know, my doula went around and made sure my essential oils were there, and we had low lighting. I'm wearing my blue blocking glasses to block out any issues with that, to kind of keep the surges strong, because there's that beautiful link between melatonin and oxytocin and keeping the hormones going. And so my surges were still happening, but I remember, and maybe it's not right, but this is my story. I remember feeling like I was being coached to push on that stool. And I don't need to be told to push. If I knew then what I know now, it would be a whole different story, I guess. But yes, so in that situation, I was sitting on a birth stool, I was bearing down, and I was told, I think I can see the head, but my waters still hadn't released. So in hindsight, that was probably the bag being pushed out. as I was bearing down. So baby wasn't quite ready to come out yet. But at that point, so time is irrelevant, I guess, at this stage. I don't know how long it was, but I got in the birth pool and I was in there and I was pushing, and finally my waters released, and it was just this beautiful, release. There's no other word, I guess. The pressure went away for a moment and I just felt so good. But then I was pushing and pushing and pushing and no baby was coming. And I was like, someone help me. Because again, I was not in my own power position. I was looking to everybody else to tell me what to do. And I remember one of my husband's fears coming through again. I would have loved for him to get in the birth pool with me. But when we were doing our fears in our hypnobirthing class, which is useful to find out what his fears were, he said he wasn't comfortable getting in the pool if there was going to be blood in there. And I'm like, well, it's birth, so there's going to be blood, babe. So I didn't want to put him in that position. And again, in hindsight, fuck him. I'm the one birthing the baby. I need him. And so, he's getting in the birth pool this time because I needed him to be my person. Because I felt like I'd failed at that point. The baby wasn't coming out. It'd been a long time. And so I ended up hopping out the water and my midwife did another check. I guess they could see I was getting frustrated and I was tired and I had been vomiting, so I was fairly dehydrated, but I wasn't ready to give up because I was so determined to get my unmedicated birth. And she checked and she said, the baby's still sitting really high. I need to get a second opinion. And so she asked me if it was all right. And I said, sure. I guess I just wanted answers at that point. If someone could tell me what I was doing wrong, which in hindsight was probably nothing. The baby just needed more time. And so they got somebody from the birth suite to come over, one of the OBs to come and check. And she took one look at me and she said, your baby's too high, you're dehydrated, you need to come to the birth suite. And I would like to prep you for a Caesar, but I guess we can talk about IV and Syntocinon first, was kind of the attitude that I was getting. Paraphrasing here, but that's kind of how it felt. And so we agreed to move to the birth suite, more so because I knew I was dehydrated and I wanted IV. That's all I wanted. Because I felt if I could get some hydration into my muscles, my uterus would start doing what it needed to do again. I guess they're not used to people coming in and kind of having an idea or have educated themselves outside of the hospital classes, which I didn't do. I did my own reading, I did my hypnobirthing course, and I did a course through my private midwives, which was a little bit more, holistic in its approach. So we moved across, but I just knew in my head, I felt so defeated because it's just cascade of intervention once you head over to the birth suite. So I was leaving my little sanctuary in the birth center, which already felt a little bit clinical for my liking, and then moving to the birth suite, still with my blue blocking glasses on. Everyone thought I was a clown. I didn't care. This OB was pretty much you should just go IV and Syntocinon if you're refusing the Caesar at this stage. But we can prep you and we can get this baby out. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm happy to keep going. Can we have a moment? So she left and my husband and I are talking, and the doula's there and the midwife's there, and they're letting us have our conversation and do our kind of brain process to figure out the benefits and what we want to do. But it really didn't sound like they were going to let us choose just IV. Even though baby's heart rate was fine, my heart rate was fine, I was happy to keep going. The suggestion was IV with Syntocinon. I wasn't just allowed IV. And by then, you're all hooked up to all of the goodies in the machine, so you can't really move around either. So water was off the cards at that point in terms of pain relief or anything like that. hooked up to monitors and things. And so when she came back in, we gave in and said, sure, we'll go IV, and then I guess I'll give the Syntocin on a go, because you also are trying to do the right thing. So if a health practitioner is telling you something, you don't want to put your baby at risk unnecessarily. And in that environment, you want to do what the experts are telling you. And also when you're in labor, you're not really meant to be making hardcore decisions. So I had my birth plan with all my, options, because things don't always go to the A plan. So you've got your B and your C and your blah, blah, blah. But I didn't feel like I was being given any of those different options. So yeah, we took that option, and then that OB coincidentally got called in to another emergency Caesar, and a different OB came in, and she said, let's, get you on the IV, let's give you half an hour to rest with the Syntocin on. Almost impossible to do. I didn't have an epidural, there was no pain relief, and the intensity of that artificial hormone surging, I don't even know if you can call it, chemical hormone surging through my body, I felt the need to push every surge that came through, and they were getting closer together, and it was fairly intense for that half an hour, but I was starting to feel better from the IV at least, with the fluids coming in. And then she came back for that half hour. So the half hour rest, and then the half hour I was allowed to push. And I'd obviously been still pushing that whole time, because I just couldn't, my midwife was just saying, do what your body needs to do, listen to your body. So it was nice to have her support, and the doula was there, and Maddie was there. And I mean, Maddie, the whole time I could just remember him saying, come on, Pickle was what we called Mads when she was in the womb, and this one's Peanut. And he was just like, come on, Pickle, you can do it. Come on, just talking to her the whole time. It was so sweet. And I guess they feel so helpless because, yeah, they're normally the protector and the masculine energy that can hold you. And obviously there was no baby after that first half hour of rest. Then the half hour of pushing, they were monitoring baby's heart rate the whole time. And baby's heart rates are meant to drop when you're in a surge. I know now. At the time, they were telling me after maybe 10 minutes of me bearing down with a surge with this artificial oxytocin in my system. And, she was starting to move down, but she wasn't coming out as quickly as I was on their timeline. I was in the hospital by a certain time, and I was on their timeline. And they said, the baby's heart rate's dropping. We need to stop for a sec. So I was on a birth stool at this stage. They pulled me back up onto the bed, and the new OB that had come in said, I know that a Caesar is really far from your birth plan, and I feel very comfortable to do a vacuum assist if you feel comfortable with that. And I was just by that stage, I'm like, yes, vaginal birth, let's do it. Whatever we can do to get this baby out through my vagina, I'm happy. And she said, cool. We are going to need to get you up in the stirrups. I'm going to have to give you a local. We may need to do an episiotomy. So they had me up in the stirrups. She did the local. Couldn't really feel what was going on, but she obviously attached the vacuum at that point. And yeah, I gave it everything I had. Maddie on one side, doula and midwife on the other side, cheering me on. And I pushed. And obviously the OB was happy that she was starting to move down, because she was encouraging. It was very supportive language that I was surrounded by. And then I had a little breather, and then we went again and then she got to the third contraction, and she said, I can't get enough. I need more space. Can I do an episiotomy? And I said, by this stage, I was like, I guess just do what you got to do. We need to get this baby out. And so she did. And that was the third, but I thought I was done. And she's like, no, the head's almost there. You need to go again. And so I did that fourth push, and the head came out. And then I was like, well, I failed. We need to go for the Caesar. I haven't got it within the number of pushes I needed to do it. She's like, no, the baby's there. You need to now just push the body out. And so we managed to get the body out, and my baby was there, and they brought her up onto my belly. And yeah, Maddie struggled to see the genitalia because her cord was actually reasonably short. And then all of a sudden they were clamping, cutting, whisking her away. He's following, what is going on? Because she was fine. I could already hear her crying. So for whatever reason, they felt the need to really separate her from the placenta so quickly and whisk her away. Luckily, they brought her back reasonably quickly, and then, she was doing her breast crawl and yeah, active and doing what she needed to do. And we had our baby girl in our arms. And there was a lot of relief, and also holding your baby for the first time. I had all of that elation and that the beautiful hormones were filling my body, but the path to get there felt a lot different to what I was expecting it to. And a lot of things were taken out of my power. And I know everyone was doing the best they could with the tools they had within the system constraints that are set for them. But knowing what I know now, if I don't have to birth in a hospital, I wouldn't. So after Madeline was born, they whisked her away, and Maddie mentioned her sex or her gender, and I just screamed at the top of my voice, Madeline, because we talked about girl name versus boy name. And so there was a lot of joy and happiness and give me my baby back in that moment. And then once she was on me, I guess just the pure relief of having got to that stage and just her being in my arms in that moment, I was ecstatic. And I wasn't even thinking about anything that had just happened. I didn't think about how sore I was. I didn't think about the fact that somebody was stitching me up or someone was sticking their finger up my bum to check that everything was responsive without permission. So yeah, there was, a lot going on in the room. But I only had eyes for Madeline at that point. And it's only afterwards, as I've had a chance, I guess, to come down from the birth. I didn't really let her out of my sight. I was in the hospital overnight just because we'd had the intervention. And then as soon as I could get out of there, I wanted to come home. But yeah, I remember that, every time they'd come into the hospital room, once I was on the ward, to see how we were doing, because they do regular 4 to 6 hourly checks through the night, and I would have her on me. I was cluster feeding. I just wanted her to be on me and with me. And I kept getting told, you got to put her back in the cot. You got to put her back in the cot. I was like, yeah, I will once she's finished feeding, and just kept going. Because that's what felt right for me. And there was still a lot of relief and still a lot of gratitude to that team that had been there, because I guess I was in that sense of, if they hadn't been there, would my baby be alive? I am so grateful to the system, to the opportunity, and everything that happened. And then over time, and I've analysed my story, and I've worked with healers and other practitioners and other midwives and doulas that I've spoken to as I've debriefed from that whole process, I've realised if I just stayed home and been on my own timeline and not gone into that fear, tension, pain cycle where everything kind of blocked up, I've learned more about myself and my own body. Like when I was in that kind of bearing down phase, my knees were super wide when I was in that birth pool. But the way that my body is, I need to be a knees in, feet out kind of gal. So I was in all the wrong positions for myself, and I wasn't listening to my body because I had given my power to other people. Whereas I have my power back now. And I think the main reason that I chose the hospital system was my husband's fear. He was scared of being responsible and being at home, even though we would have had midwives. The midwives that we had kept saying, are you sure you don't want a home birth? And it kept coming back to that financial pressure, and it kept coming back to the fear of being so far. And we were only 10 minutes from the hospital. So really, if anything had gone awry, it would have been so easy for us to get to the hospital. And I realized that a lot of things happened to me, not for me, when I look at it, when I look back on it. And I didn't realize that I had experienced trauma until I really sat with my story over time and thought about how I felt, thought about what had happened, thought about how it could have gone if I'd made different choices, if I'd, I mean, I did the best I could at the time, and there's no blame here on anyone. It's more about knowing that there's other options and that home birth is actually really safe, and it can be an amazing experience if you get the right team around you. But also women's bodies know how to do this. So even just left alone, we can do it. We can do it ourselves. So I'm 36 weeks pregnant right now, and for this birth journey I have chosen a home birth, and I'm really excited. I'm going to be birthing in this room, and I knew even before we got pregnant, we consciously conceived both of our babies, so we knew we wanted to get pregnant. We did a lot of preconception work, and so when we got our positive pregnancy test, I already knew who I was going to contact for my home birth this time, and it was different to who I had last time, just because I'd done more research and I'd learned more about the system and my options and what other things I could do out there. And some of my friends have since home birthed and had fantastic experiences. And so as soon as I got the positive pregnancy test, I told my husband, I told my daughter, and then I messaged the private midwives and the doula that I wanted. And yeah, they've been incredible supports on this journey so far. A beautiful continuity of care, really building rapport. I get to see them regularly and feel emotionally supported, physically supported, mentally supported, and so confident in my decision. And then I got introduced to this concept. So I'm birthing at home, but now I'm only birthing with the support of my doula, because nothing against my private midwives, they're amazing. And I'm actually sad to be making the decision to let them go. But I realized, I kind of did a bit of a drumming journey and kind of sat with myself and really thought about it. Do I need them there, or did I want them there? And because it was a want rather than a need, I thought, well, I want to do this on my own. And it was a really strong, clear message when I meditated on it. It was literally a fuck yes, you can do this. And this is a big growth point for you. This is an up leveling for you. One day I want to support birthing women. So I feel like it's a big part of my growth, and what this baby wants and needs is to birth at home with not many people present. So yeah, I've got a birth keeper or doula that I really feel very supported by. She's got a lot of experience. My husband and I have educated ourselves to the hilt. We've read a lot of books. We're connected in circles with other women who are taking similar paths. And so before, when I kind of felt a little bit alone, thinking about home birthing, because it is not the norm, unfortunately, as it should be, now I realize that, this is the way it's supposed to be. And there is a lot of support for people when they choose to find it. And there's a lot of education out there if people search for it. And when other people's fears come up, I mean, I'm not really sharing with many people prior to the birth, but once we've met our baby, both me and my husband will be singing from the mountaintops about what we've done, to share how amazing it is, and to share how everyone who has a low-risk pregnancy has this option to do this and can do it. And so, we're really excited. It feels weird to be going so far away from the system, but I realize even though my midwife team are amazing and I would really love to have them here, I felt this need for myself to move as far away from the system as possible, and to just have this as naturally, as physiologically as it's meant to be. And if there's any need to go to hospital, we're only 10 minutes away, but I'm not even giving that any energy, because all the visualization and work that I'm doing around the preparation is me bringing my baby into the world, roaring her out right here. And before we know it, she's going to be here. I mean, she could arrive from next Friday onwards. So it's just a waiting game now, and we're really excited to meet her and to have her born in this space. What I'm hoping for with this birth is to have the opportunity to really stay in my power, to really listen to my body. And I thought I had surrendered last time, but I hadn't, because I had given so much of my voice and my power to other people. Whereas this time, I'm really going to go inwards so early. I'm going to be really listening to my body, and I'm willing to go with the flow, like really truly understanding that concept of surrender now more so, and really tuning into what my baby is doing and feeling her and knowing, talking to her, you know, going really deep together to finding what she needs and where she needs me to be. And if it's a long journey, it's a long journey, and I'm going to hang in there. And if she comes roaring into the world quickly, also very open to that. But I'm very excited to have water available to me as pain relief and to support her entry into the world, if that feels right for us at that time. I mean, she's either an Aquarian or a Pisces, so I'm feeling there's a strong water energy there. But yeah, I'm really hoping that I stay in my trust of myself, and I just have such a strong belief that everything's going to unfold just as it's supposed to, and she's going to be here before I know it. But I'm just genuinely so excited.
So I'm Matthias Turner. This is my family, my wife Stacey, and my beautiful daughter Madeline. I should say you guys are both beautiful. But during the lead up to Mads being born, we'd done our hypnobirthing courses, and it was really exciting to think about what a gentle birth could look like for us. And at home, it was really kind of flowing along and being quite a nice progression. I guess, like, neither of us ever having gone through labor before. It was it was an interesting thing. We were just kind of waiting for it to see what would happen. And it was progressing nicely. And then we kind of went to the hospital, and we had a doula and we had a private midwife. And when we got to the hospital, it's almost like a switch was flicked, where we had planned to have this beautiful natural birth and everything to be really nice and smooth. But it's almost like there was a timer on. And so as soon as things didn't go to plan within a certain amount of time, the midwife transitioned from being, okay, this is just a nice birth, to, okay, things have to happen. And there was a lot of pressure, I think, on Stace as soon as we got to the hospital, because as soon as we got into the bath, no, I think it was even before we hopped in the bath, the midwife was like, I can see the head, let's go, you've got to push, like, it's time to roll. And so we hopped into the bath then, and nothing was happening still, and we were in there for ages, and that's when it really became like a push. And then we had a obstetrician come in, and it went from being, you're going to have this beautiful, nice, natural birth, doing it the way that you want to in this special room that we'd hired out, to being, Stacey, Maddie, we need to move you into this different room and we're going to cut your baby out. And it was really a very different experience all of a sudden, where we really didn't feel like we had much of a choice. It was kind of like, well, hold up, can we do a few things? We knew Stacey, so before we left home, Stacey had vomited. And so when we got to the hospital, I was like, we need to get liquid into her. And so we actually asked for an IV, and they said, no, there's no point in doing the IV. We want to do they weren't even going to do the Syntocin, and we really had to push for that. We talked to our doula, we talked to our midwife, and that was pretty much what we had come to agree to doing, to make it, give us that little bit of extra time. Like, any time that we had was going to be golden. But yeah, when it came to that transition, it really seemed like there was no other answer. It had to be a cesarean or nothing else. And it didn't feel like the obstetrician was budging in any way whatsoever. So it was really, to be honest, it really felt like we went from this massive lead up to, you're going to have the most beautiful experience, to being put into a system where they're like, no, this is the only way to move forward. And then when we got into the room, it just so happened to be quite an interesting situation where the obstetrician who was talking to us about getting the baby cut out the whole time, she wasn't available, which was lucky. And so we got another obstetrician that came in who then was willing to do a vacuum assist with us, but it was with the condition that Stacey did it within 3 pushes. So it was pretty intense, right? Things started to happen. They did the I don't even remember what it's called, but the spike in Madeline's head where they make sure that the monitor is on. And it went from being what of a beautiful experience, it still was, to being a very medical procedure. And the vacuum went on, and it was pretty intense, right? Things went on, and Stacey had to get cut. You need to get things to happen, but we still managed to get it. And on the third one, it was like, I don't know,
not quite there.
Yeah,
she
exactly.
Gave me one
she gave
more,
her one
didn't
more because she'd Mads had moved so much. But yeah, when she came out, it was obviously the most beautiful thing. And I think one of the most interesting things to me, or there's a few of them, but a few of the most interesting things is, we got told later that the obstetrician came in and talked to our midwife, the one that was pushing for the cesarean, and said thank you to us, without actually saying it to us, but saying thank you for challenging her and for pushing her, because it was all she knew. It was all she wanted to do, because that's all she did that whole night, was chop babies out of women. The second thing is that there were 94 beds in the unit, and we were 2 of the 94 that were all full, that had vaginal births that day. Yeah, the rest of them were all cut out. So it really kind of opened my eyes to, there is almost a broken system going on, right? When that's the way of it. And I mean, I don't know how far to go down the rabbit hole, but I've heard since that they get paid for that, for a cesarean, versus if they just let it be natural. So it was very interesting. It felt like we were pushed in a certain direction. That was the only direction we were able to go. But it was interesting because we pushed back so much, we all of a sudden got given this little side door, and that's where we got to go. So
lucky.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think, to be honest, it's a scary situation because you don't know what you're going in for already. All you're trying to do is be the best support that you can. But in a situation where you feel powerless, it does feel scary all of a sudden, because you don't have the ability to say, well, I guess you do in a sense, to say, I think you're wrong and I think we should wait. But when medical intervention comes into play and pretty much you're given an ultimatum of, you either get this or you don't, and if you don't, then we're gonna drug your wife. She's gonna go completely under. You're not gonna get to see your baby. Like, it's a very scare tactic.
Scary.
It was a very scare tactic to try and make things happen as well, which I feel not a relaxing situation for anyone involved in that, right? So yeah.
Yeah, when you hear it spoken like that, even in hindsight now, it feels very coercive.
Yeah.
Which is not a supportive, mother-centered approach, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think really, if like time was on our side that night in the way that things played out, and if it wasn't, then we would have ended up with a cesarean. And I mean, if that's the situation you're given, then so be it. But when we really put our foot down and did fight for extra time and did the things that we did, it worked out that we could have a vaginal birth. So it really played differently, but it definitely was a bit of a scary experience. Yeah. I think, to be honest, we were just so smitten with her. Like, I don't know, and obviously it might have been a bit different for you, but she was just like this new shining light that we were just so obsessed with that I don't think it really hindered that experience. Like, we were just so stoked that she was healthy and happy.
I think a lot of people focus so much on the labour and birth and forget about the parenting part. And we were very excited to be parents. And I guess she was a fairly cruisy baby. She was, the transition to breastfeeding for me was challenging, but doable. And I was, very excited to be a mum. So I was happy to have her just constantly on the boob. We had our days where Maddie would come home from work and I'd be crying with her, which is fairly normal. But for the most part, I feel like we bonded more deep, like we connected more deeply after that experience. And because he trusted in me so much and was fighting for me so much, that played a big part in us connecting more through that experience, even though, you know, it was traumatic, we came out the other side stronger together.
Yeah, excited. I think it's nerve-wracking knowing what 1 to 2 is going to be like, but if Mads is anything to go off of, we'll be fine. It'll be amazing. It'll be a good experience. I think, yeah, it is obviously nerve-wracking understanding how it's going to be with a newborn again. Like we had friends who just had a newborn and held the baby the other day. I was like, oh, that's right. They're completely dependent on you. That whole situation is remembering the stages again. But it's exciting.
And what about the fact that I've chosen to home birth this time?
Yeah, like, were you always on board with that decision, or did you guys have to work together to come to that decision? Or?
I think, to be honest, we were pretty close to doing it almost last time. I was maybe a bit nervous about it, and so it didn't happen. But it was almost like, I think for us, it was a normal progression to some extent. I almost knew it was coming. I'm excited to do it from home. I think it's going to be very different. I think, obviously, every baby is different with the way they're born, but yeah, I'm excited. I think it's going to be a really beautiful experience. Being able to just stay and be in our area and in our zone. And if anything, it's really made us, or also Stacey, I shouldn't say us, it's made Stacey do a lot more research, which she's then shared with me into how the whole situation goes, right? How the actual natural birth and how it can play out if there aren't, I guess, people pulling you in the wrong direction. So, yeah, I'm really excited for that part of it. Like, that was probably the thing that stopped me the first time around, was the safety side of things. Like, once again, never having done it before, never having even seen a birth before, apart from the videos that we watched in the lead up to having Mads, and then not understanding that you can have that safety and everything from home. And if it doesn't go right and you're at home, then you've still got the backup option of the hospital. And so I think for that first time experience, it was just that, once again, we weren't educated enough in it. But now I feel like after making the decision to go and do it this way, once again, Stacey's done a lot to educate her and pass it on to me.
He's an audible learner.
And it's really filled us with confidence, I think, is the best way to put it. Yeah.
And I felt so supported by Maddie in this whole decision-making process. If I've come to him saying, we need to home birth this baby, we'd already talked about it before we'd conceived, but yeah, he was fully on board, and there was no doubt from him that made me doubt myself. And then the decision to let go of our midwives, I wasn't sure how he'd go with that, but when I was meditating on it, he was one of my kind of red flags. And then I spoke to him about it. He's like, no, if you feel comfortable doing this, let's do it. And just gives me goosebumps even thinking about like the support and the encouragement that I've received from him the whole way. So thanks.
So beautiful.
So beautiful. I'm so excited.